The sky over Earth burned as the Concorde's dreadnoughts hung above the planet, massive and silent like vultures in the heavens. Every city, every monument, every symbol of human civilization was being wiped away, one brutal strike at a time. The Council of the Galactic Concorde had spoken, and the sentence was final. Humanity's time had ended. Admiral Orcs stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching through the viewport as the last remnants of Earth's atmosphere flickered under the bombardment. Her jaw clenched, fingers white around the command chair. She had lost everything: her family, her home, her career. And yet she still felt the sharpness of duty. As humanity's last hope, she would not let them perish in the shadows. The fleet had been hastily assembled. Only the strongest, most determined members of the military and civilian government were aboard the ships that escaped Earth's demise. She had witnessed the final broadcasts, her people's final moments, desperate transmissions begging for mercy. None had come. Now, only one thing remained: the journey to the outer veil. Behind her, Theo Malik, the scientist who had once been a quiet and unassuming member of Earth's top research institutions, stepped forward. He wore the faintest frown, eyes never straying from the readouts on the nearby consoles. "We have a problem," he muttered, as a holographic map appeared between them. His finger traced an uncertain path across the galaxy. "We don't know what awaits us in the veil. The mapping data is decades old. If we're lucky, we might find a suitable system to colonize before we starve." Work didn't respond right away. Her gaze remained fixed on the planet's surface, where she could still see the distant flashes of explosions in what had once been the Pacific Rim. "What are you proposing?" she asked after a beat, her voice steady. "We adapt. We survive," Malik said, his voice thick with determination. "We have no choice. But there's something else. Earth. It's not just a symbol of who we were. There's something buried beneath its surface, something the Concorde didn't know about, something that could give us an edge." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" Malik hesitated, then pulled up an encrypted data file on a secure terminal. He tapped a few commands, and a 3D rendering of Earth's core appeared. A swirling mass of molten rock and magnetic fields, but deeper within the crust, something caught the light. A hidden structure, ancient, yet unmistakably crafted. "It's alien," Malik continued. "Older than anything we've encountered in our records, and I believe it could be the key to something far more powerful than we've ever imagined. If we can find it before the Concorde or any other power in the Veil does, we may have a chance to turn the tide." Rourke turned slowly toward him, her heart pounding. This was it, the one slim thread of hope. "How long until we're in range?" "A few weeks," Malik replied, scanning the map. "We'll need to move fast." Rourke nodded, her decision made. "Set course. We'll find whatever's hidden on Earth. And when we do, we'll make them regret thinking humanity would fade." The Defiant shifted course, its engines humming with purpose. Earth was gone, but humanity was far from finished. In the depths of the galaxy's forgotten corners, humanity would rise again, not as fugitives, but as something more, something greater. The outer veil was nothing like the glittering star systems of the galactic core. It was a wasteland, a region of space where ancient civilizations had once thrived only to fall into ruin, their remnants scattered across dark, barren worlds. The stars were distant, and the galaxies beyond the veil were little more than ghosts in the blackness. For the survivors of Earth, it was the only place left to call home. Admiral Rourke stood on the observation deck of the Defiant, watching the endless expanse of dark space stretch before her. The once proud fleet was now little more than a ragtag group of ships, each one clinging to life, battered by years of war and exile. The crew was worn thin, many having lost everything in the destruction of Earth. Supplies were dwindling, and tensions were running high. If they didn't find a way to survive here, humanity would not last. "Admiral, we've reached the first system," came a voice over the comms. Rourke didn't look away from the viewport. Any signs of hostile presence? None yet, the officer replied. "But we've detected several derelict stations. No activity, but they're heavily damaged. Could be valuable resources." Rourke nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. Even now, she could hear the echoes of those final moments on Earth. The chaos, the screams, the firestorms consuming everything she knew. Earth was gone, reduced to ash. The Concorde had done it, wiped away her home, her people without mercy. But the survivors had no time to mourn. They had to fight. At her side, Dr. Theo Malik joined her, his brow furrowed in thought. "I've been analyzing the data from the alien artifact," he said, his voice lower than usual. "I'm certain it's not just a relic. It's a weapon of some kind, but we don't understand how it works yet." "You think it's our key to survival?" Rourke asked, turning her eyes toward him. "It might be," Malik answered, "but we need time, resources, and trust. We can't afford to waste what little we have." Rourke didn't argue. The urgency in Malik's voice was undeniable. They needed answers, and the artifact was their best chance to fight back against the Concorde or any other forces that might threaten them. But first, they needed to secure the resources to survive in this hostile region. "Set a course for the nearest station," Rourke ordered. "We'll salvage what we can." The clock is ticking. The salvage operation began in earnest. The derelict stations were abandoned husks, relics of civilizations long gone, their technology obsolete or decayed beyond repair. Yet, humanity's ingenuity shone through. Engineers and technicians worked around the clock, using scavenged parts to patch together systems, repurpose machinery, and extract what little energy remained. The most pressing issue, however, was the supply of food and water. In the Veil, nothing came easily. Weeks passed, and the strain of survival began to take its toll. Rations were stretched thin, and tempers frayed. Some began to question if they would ever find a new home, a place where humanity could begin again. Despair hung over the fleet like a thick fog, clouding their every action. Rourke's resolve never wavered, but even she could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her shoulders. She knew how fragile hope was, how easily it could slip away. If humanity was to survive, they had to adapt, just as they had done in the chaos of Earth's final days. They couldn't afford to be weak, couldn't afford to wait for rescue or salvation. One night, after a grueling day of repairs and salvage, Rourke found herself standing alone on the Defiance Bridge, staring out at the void. The stars seemed so distant, so unreachable. She had lost everything once, her home, her loved ones, her world. But in this vast, empty expanse, there was only one thing left to fight for: survival. "Admiral." Malik's voice cut through her thoughts. She turned to face him. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, a glimmer of purpose, perhaps. "What is it, Theo?" "I found something," he said, holding up a small data pad. "It's a map, a location deep in the Veil. It could lead us to something significant, maybe even a habitable world." Rourke raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure?" Malik nodded, determination in his eyes. "It's a risk, but it's a risk we have to take." The ship's engines hummed with power as Rourke gave the order. "Set course. We're moving out." Humanity's survival in the outer Veil was no longer just a matter of enduring. They had begun to thrive. It wasn't a fast process. The first year in Exile had been spent scavenging, patching together a fleet of ships and stations, and barely holding on. But something had changed in the second year. The survivors of Earth, united by the fire of their shared loss, began to show what they were truly capable of. The Defiant, now the flagship of the Coalition fleet, had been the first to push into the Veil's outer systems, and slowly they had discovered that not every world here was dead. Admiral Rourke paced the command deck, her mind racing with the developments. The newly named Coalition of Exiled Nations, CEN, was growing stronger every day. The fleet had secured multiple systems with habitable moons, and over the last 6 months, humanity had begun terraforming those worlds. But the expansion was not without its challenges. "Admiral," Lieutenant Hale called from his station. "We've located another promising world, Elysium 9. The atmospheric readings are stable, and the tectonic activity suggests a deep geothermal energy source. It could support a colony." Rourke turned to face the younger officer. "What's the catch?" Hale hesitated. "There's evidence of an ancient alien structure deep beneath the surface. It could either be a boon or a danger, but the readings are consistent with technology far beyond anything we've seen before." Rourke's brow furrowed. "Make sure we send a reconnaissance team. We don't take unnecessary risks." It was the first time in months that the fleet had seen something that might be of real value, something beyond just scraping by. The terraforming process had been slower than expected, with limited resources, but now the possibility of accessing ancient technology could change everything. The hope it sparked among the people aboard the fleet was palpable. The dream of finding something that would allow them to truly rebuild their civilization, something that might be more than just survival, fueled every decision. Later that evening, Rourke and Dr. Malik stood together in the war room, watching as the results from their latest scans of Elysium 9 poured in. Malik, who had become an integral part of the Coalition's leadership, had his eyes glued to a holographic display of the planet's surface. "There's something strange about these readings," Malik said, his voice tense. "The energy signatures aren't just coming from a single location. They're scattered, like there's a network buried under the planet." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "Are you saying the planet's entire surface could be covered in alien technology?" "It's possible," Malik replied, "or at least parts of it. Whatever it is, it could be the key to turning the tide in this war of survival. The Concord won't stand a chance if we get our hands on this tech." But even as hope flickered, Rourke knew there were risks. The Veil was filled with dangers beyond their comprehension, but they had no choice but to move forward. Days later, the Defiant and the expedition fleet arrived in orbit around Elysium 9. A team of soldiers, engineers, and scientists, including Rourke and Malik, descended to the surface, the small shuttle cutting through the alien skies. As they landed in a rocky canyon, their boots kicked up dust, and the smell of a planet long forgotten filled the air. The expedition set out toward the coordinates. Beneath the planet's surface, buried in the crust, lay the alien structures, an abandoned city, ancient and eerily intact. But as they ventured deeper into the ruins, something shifted. The air grew heavier, colder. "I don't like this," one of the soldiers muttered, his hand never straying far from his weapon. "Something's not right." Rourke stopped, holding up a hand. "Stay alert." Malik stepped forward, scanning the ruins with his handheld device. "I've never seen anything like this. The energy signatures, they're active." Before anyone could respond, the ground trembled beneath them. A low hum filled the air, and the ancient city seemed to come alive, its dormant technology stirring. Then, an alarm blared from Malik's device. "We're not alone," he said, his voice grim. From the shadows, figures began to emerge, alien machines, their sleek, metallic bodies glistening under the dim light. The machines appeared to be of the same design as the relics they had found on Earth. But these were far more advanced, far more dangerous. Rourke didn't hesitate. She pulled her weapon from its holster and raised it. "Defensive positions," she shouted. "We hold this ground, no matter what." The machines moved toward them, their glowing eyes flickering with an unspoken purpose. And as they closed in, Rourke realized something. Humanity had just stumbled upon an ancient power, but it came with a cost. To survive, they would have to fight. And this time, they couldn't afford to lose. The tension in the air was palpable as the Defiant's crew worked tirelessly to extract what they could from Elysium 9's alien ruins. The machines that had emerged from the depths of the city were unlike anything humanity had ever faced. Silent, graceful, and lethal, they moved with a purpose, though their intent was unclear. The first skirmish had been brief, a warning rather than a full confrontation. Rourke had given the order to retreat, and the expedition team had returned to the Defiant under the cover of darkness. but the planet's eerie energy pulses still hummed, echoing through the silence of space. "I've analyzed the data from the planet," Dr. Malik said, his eyes glued to a holographic display in the command center. His face was pale, his jaw tight with concern. Those machines, they weren't just protecting the city. They were guarding something. A weapon, or maybe something worse. Worse? Rourke echoed, stepping forward. "Explain." "There are too many variables, but from what I can tell, they were not native to Elysium-9," Malik continued. "These machines seem to have been constructed by another, older species, a species that had wiped itself out long before the Concorde ever existed. And based on the energy readings, whatever they were guarding, it's still active." Rourke narrowed her eyes. The possibilities that the planet held now seemed endless, both terrifying and exhilarating. So, if these machines were guarding something, the Concorde might want it too. "Exactly," Malik replied, his voice thick with realization. "The Concorde doesn't just wipe out planets. This isn't about control. They've been searching for something in the Veil. Maybe the same thing we've just found." Rourke's gaze turned toward the map of the galaxy, her thoughts racing. The Concorde would never allow humanity to grow strong again. The very fact that they had found something valuable in the Veil could be a death sentence. If the Concorde found out about Elysium-9, they wouldn't hesitate to strike. The survival of humanity had just taken on an entirely new urgency. "This has to stay under wraps," she ordered. "We can't risk the Concorde knowing about this until we understand what we're dealing with." The days following the discovery were tense. In the dark recesses of the fleet, whispers spread. Rourke knew the truth. Hope had given way to fear. Humanity's fight for survival was no longer just against the Veil, but against the alien forces that guarded its ancient secrets. It wasn't just about surviving the void anymore. It was about reclaiming the galaxy. But then, a report came through from their outermost sensor stations. The Concorde had found them. A scout ship, a small vessel, had wandered too close to their new territory, no doubt trying to locate the fleet's coordinates. It had transmitted a distress signal before being destroyed by a burst of energy, likely from one of the ancient machines that Malik had discovered. Rourke felt a chill run down her spine. The Concorde had learned that humanity was far from finished, and the galaxy was about to witness their retaliation. That evening, Rourke met with her senior officers in the war room. The Defiance crew had grown used to seeing their leader in battle, calm and collected in the midst of chaos. But tonight, the weight of her decisions bore down heavily on her. "The Concorde won't stop until they've eradicated us," she began, her voice low but steady. "Their fleet is already en route to this sector. We'll need to be ready." "What about the machines?" asked Lieutenant Hale. "Shouldn't we try to study them further, see if we can use their technology against the Concorde?" Rourke shook her head. "I don't trust them. We don't know enough, and we can't afford to make another mistake. What we need is to get the jump on them before they strike." Malik, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. "We've been building up our strength, but we don't have enough firepower to match the Concorde's fleet. Not yet. We need more time, more resources." Rourke's eyes hardened. "Time is a luxury we don't have." She paused, then made her decision. "We'll strike first, a show of force. I want to hit the Concorde where it hurts, inside their communications network. We'll hack into their systems, expose their lies to the galaxy, and make them pay for everything they've done to us." There was a moment of stunned silence before Malik spoke again, his tone guarded. "You're suggesting we attack their command centers?" "That's..." "Yes," Rourke interrupted. "We'll cripple them from the inside." She looked around the room at her team. The people who had watched Earth burn, who had survived against all odds. They were ready. They had nothing left to lose, and everything to gain. "Prepare the fleet," she ordered. "We take the fight to them. Now." The fleet's engines hummed with a palpable sense of purpose as it gathered in formation. Admiral Rourke stood at the helm of the Defiant, her eyes locked on the starfield ahead, where the Concorde fleet was expected to appear within hours. The weight of their decision, hung heavily on her shoulders. Striking first had always been a gamble, but in their current position, they had no choice. "Admiral." Lieutenant Hale's voice crackled through the comms, pulling Rourke from her thoughts. "Our long-range sensors are picking up Concord vessels on approach. They'll be within range in 10 minutes. Rourke's fingers tightened around the armrest of her chair. "Understood. Prepare the fleet for evasive maneuvers. This isn't just a defensive mission anymore. This is our opportunity." Her voice was steady, but inside, her heart raced. Every fiber of her being told her this was the right move, but the uncertainty of the outcome still gnawed at her. If they failed, humanity's last hope would be extinguished, and the Concorde would do everything in its power to finish what it had started. As the minutes passed, the fleet grew closer to the target, a critical Concorde communications relay station orbiting a barren moon. It was a hub of command and coordination, and if they could cripple it, the Concorde's ability to launch coordinated strikes would be severely hindered. If they could do it silently, without revealing their hand to the rest of the Concorde fleet, they might even have a chance to escape before the inevitable retaliation. "All systems online, Admiral," Malik reported, his voice calm yet laced with urgency. "I've got the code for the relay's security. We're in." "Good," Rourke said, her gaze narrowing on the blinking red lights ahead. "Let's make this quick and clean." A soft chime sounded, signaling the readiness of the fleet. A dozen ships, heavily armed and outfitted with salvage technology from the ruins of the Veil, were in position. They were outgunned, outnumbered, but they had surprise, and that could make all the difference. Rourke turned to her team. "We strike now. Full speed ahead." The Defiant surged forward, cutting through space toward the communications relay. It was a delicate mission, one that required absolute precision. The fleet's smaller ships would sneak in close to the station, while the larger vessels would maintain a safe distance, ready to provide fire support if things went south. As they neared the station, the silence of space enveloped them. No alarms, no warnings, just the eerie hum of their own engines and the distant, lifeless rock of the moon they were about to assault. Rourke watched as the first wave of ships moved into position, their stealth systems activated to ensure they remained undetected by Concorde sensors. Then, without warning, a series of blinding flashes erupted across the silent expanse of space. The Defiant's weapon systems came alive, firing in quick succession, disrupting the station's power grid and sending shockwaves through its exterior. Explosions rippled across the station's hull as it began to buckle under the attack. "Direct hit on the relay's core," Malik called out, his voice a mix of relief and disbelief. "The core's destabilizing. We've got a few minutes before it goes critical." "Get ready to move," Rourke ordered. "We don't wait for the fireworks." The team worked with the precision of a well-oiled machine. While the Concorde fleet remained unaware, the smaller ships moved into position to finish the job. The relay station was already crippled, but they needed to ensure it couldn't be repaired. The mission was a success, but they couldn't afford to be caught in the crossfire. The countdown to detonation began. 5 minutes to full destruction, Malik reported, his face illuminated by the glow of the terminal. "Move out," Rourke barked. Now. The fleet began to pull away, retreating toward the safety of the dark void beyond the moon. Their escape would have to be as precise as their strike, and they would need every ounce of speed and stealth to outrun the inevitable pursuit. But just as they were preparing to jump into hyperspace, the Concorde responded. A massive warship, far larger than anything humanity had ever encountered, dropped out of hyperspace on the edge of the system. It was followed by a dozen smaller vessels, their guns powered up and locked onto the fleet. "The Concorde flagship," Malik muttered, eyes wide. "They found us." Rourke's eyes were steely. "They're not going to catch us. Not today." The fleet's engines roared to life as they made a hard turn, setting a course for the nearest jump point. The fight had only just begun. The Defiant and its fleet surged toward the jump point, engines firing at maximum output as the Concorde warship and its escorts closed in. Rourke's pulse raced, the adrenaline coursing through her veins as the gravity of their situation sank in. They had crippled the Concorde's communications relay, but now the entire Concorde fleet had been mobilized in retaliation. The tide was turning, and there was no guarantee that they would survive this. "Admiral," Lieutenant Hale's voice cut through the tension. "The flagship is gaining on us. It's too fast. We won't make it to the jump point in time." Rourke's mind raced. They were caught in a deadly trap, surrounded by Concorde ships with no escape route. She had anticipated retaliation, but not this level of aggression so quickly. A part of her felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing they had inflicted damage on the Concorde's infrastructure. But that satisfaction quickly gave way to cold pragmatism. They had to survive, and right now, survival meant a brutal counterattack. "We're not going down without a fight," Rourke said, her voice steely with resolve. "Prepare the fleet for evasive maneuvers. Target the enemy's engines and propulsion systems. Make sure they can't chase us. We need to create an opening." Dr. Malik, standing beside Rourke at the command table, looked over at her with concern. "Admiral, we're not equipped to take on the flagship, not directly. If we fight, we'll be destroyed before we get close." Rourke gave him a sharp look. "And if we don't fight, we're dead anyway. We've got no choice." The communications officer turned to Rourke, her voice urgent. "Admiral, the Concorde flagship is sending a signal. It's a direct command to the smaller ships. Looks like they're preparing to surround us. They're not just going for a kill. They're going for containment." The realization hit like a fist to the gut. The Concorde wanted to capture them. They wanted the technology, the secrets of the alien relic, the information they had gleaned from Elysium 9. It wasn't just about revenge for the relay. It was about taking control of humanity's last hope. "Rourke," Malik's voice was tight. "The machines on Elysium 9, they're not just defensive. I think they're linked to the artifact we've recovered. If we can harness their power, we might stand a chance." His words struck Rourke like a lightning bolt. It wasn't just about the relic. They could use the relic. The technology from the ancient alien world, combined with their ingenuity, might be the key to turning the tide in this battle. But they couldn't afford to wait to fully understand it. "Activate the artifact," Rourke ordered, her voice calm but laced with urgency. Now, the entire bridge seemed to hold its breath as Malik rushed to the console, his hands flying over the controls. The artifact, which had been dormant for so long, flickered to life. A strange, humming energy filled the air, and for a moment, it seemed as though the very fabric of reality bent and warped around them. A sharp, bright pulse of light erupted from the ship's core. Rourke's heart skipped a beat as the energy surged outward in a wave of power. Then something happened that none of them could have anticipated. The Concorde flagship shuddered, its engines flickering as the energy pulse swept through its systems. For a moment, its shields flickered and failed, leaving it vulnerable. The smaller vessels in pursuit wavered, their weapons temporarily disabled as the wave of alien power cascaded over them. "Captain, the flagship's shields are down," Hale shouted. "We have an opening." Rourke didn't hesitate. "Take the shot. All guns, fire on the flagship's propulsion." The Defiant's weapon systems roared to life. A barrage of energy beams and missiles struck the Concorde flagship with pinpoint accuracy. The massive ship groaned as it took hit after hit, its engines spasming and flickering. The smaller Concorde ships scrambled to adjust, but the Defiant's strike had created chaos in their ranks. Malik's voice rang out in disbelief. "It's working. The artifact. We've triggered a chain reaction. The energy pulse is interfering with their systems." Rourke's eyes narrowed, a surge of hope rising in her chest. They had done it. They had created an opening. The Concorde was vulnerable. And now, humanity had a fighting chance. "Reinforce our shields." Rourke barked. "Prepare to jump to the next system. We hit them hard. But we can't stay and fight this out. We're pulling back, but we're not running. Not yet." The Defiant and its fleet tore away from the chaotic scene, their engines flaring as they broke through the remaining line of Concorde ships. They weren't out of the woods yet, but the first signs of victory were clear. The fleet had just struck a devastating blow, and the Concorde flagship, though not destroyed, had been severely crippled. Rourke exhaled sharply, the weight of the battle still pressing down on her shoulders, but a grim satisfaction spread across her face. Humanity had taken a step toward reclaiming their place in the galaxy. It wasn't over, but they had shown the Concorde that they were not so easily defeated. The stars streaked by as the fleet made its jump, the sudden rush of faster-than-light travel snapping them out of the chaos of the battle. But even as they entered the hyperspace corridor, Rourke knew the fight wasn't over. The Concorde would hunt them down. The opening they'd created had been temporary, but it was enough to let them escape, for now. "Admiral, we've reached the next system." Lieutenant Hale's voice broke through the tense silence of the bridge. "We're in uncharted space, far from the Concorde's known territory." Rourke nodded. It was a small victory, but it was one that bought them time. Time they desperately needed to regroup, resupply, and plan their next move. The artifact's power had given them an edge, but it was an edge they couldn't afford to waste. They needed to understand it fully, and they needed to build on their victory before the Concorde's wrath descended upon them. "Report," she said, turning to Malik, who stood beside the holo-table, his eyes fixed on the data streaming in. "We're not in the clear yet," Malik replied. "The Concorde flagship may be crippled, but it's still operational. The other ships are likely calling for reinforcements, and they'll adapt quickly. It's only a matter of time before they find us again. They won't stop until they wipe us out." Rourke's jaw clenched. She had known this moment would come, the moment where humanity would need to fight not just for survival, but for their right to exist in the galaxy. They couldn't keep running. It was time to make a stand. "We need to fortify this system," Rourke said decisively. "Find any resource-rich planets or moons. We need to establish a foothold here, a base of operations, and fast." "But Admiral," Malik protested, "we still don't understand how to fully harness the artifact's power. If we don't act now, we'll be cornered," Rourke interrupted. "We'll be ready to defend ourselves. We'll need to fight to keep what we've won. And when the time is right, we'll turn the artifact's power against the Concorde for good." The fleet spread out over the next few days, mapping the system's resources and establishing a series of outposts on a nearby moon. It was barren and inhospitable, but it had an abundance of minerals, enough to fuel their ships and give them a chance to rebuild. In the makeshift command center, Rourke gathered her senior officers. The mood was tense, the stakes higher than they had ever been. "We have a short window to prepare," Rourke said, her eyes scanning the faces of her team. "The Concorde won't take long to regroup. When they do, we'll have to hit them where it hurts, directly at their supply lines. We need to cripple their ability to strike back, and we need to do it fast. We're still trying to figure out the full capabilities of the artifact," Malik said cautiously. "It's dangerous, Admiral. We don't know what else it can do." "I know," Rourke replied, her voice hard. "But we're out of time. We can't wait for the perfect plan. We need to hit the Concorde hard, before they hit us first." There was a long pause as the officers exchanged glances. Then Hale spoke up. "We've located one of their fuel depots. If we destroy it, it could cripple their fleet's ability to move, make them vulnerable." Rourke's eyes gleamed with cold determination. "Then that's where we'll strike. We're going to take the fight to them. This is our chance to show them that humanity won't just survive. We'll fight back." The next few days were a blur of preparation. The fleet gathered its forces, assembling a task force to assault the Concorde fuel depot. The mission was risky, but it was their best shot at weakening the enemy's ability to retaliate. As the assault team prepared to depart, Rourke stood at the edge of the hangar bay, her eyes drawn to the ships and soldiers preparing for battle. The Defiant stood ready, its hull scarred from the previous battle but still formidable. There was no turning back now. The galaxy would never forget what humanity had done, and they had no intention of being erased. "Admiral, we're ready to depart," Hale said, stepping up beside her. "All systems are go. The fleet's behind you." Rourke looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Make sure we're all coming home, Lieutenant. We're not just taking down a depot. We're taking down the Concorde's grip on this galaxy. Don't forget that." Hale nodded, his face hardening with resolve. "We won't." With that, Rourke turned and headed toward the Defiant's command deck. They were going into the firestorm now, and she wouldn't rest until they'd shattered the enemy's hold on the stars. It was time for humanity to strike back. The fleet moved silently through the cold depths of space, its ships cloaked in the shadows of the barren moon they had claimed as their own. In the days since their retreat into this uncharted system, Admiral Rourke had seen her fleet grow stronger. Supplies were replenished, ships were repaired, and morale, while still fragile, was rising. They were preparing for their final assault on the Concorde, a direct strike against one of their most vital fuel depots. If successful, it could cripple the enemy's capacity to wage war across the galaxy. Rourke stood in front of the bridge's main viewport, watching the endless void. She could feel the weight of what was about to happen. The mission was high risk. If they failed, the fleet would be exposed, vulnerable, and the Concorde would show no mercy. But if they succeeded, they could deal a decisive blow to the enemy. "Admiral," Hale's voice broke through her thoughts. "We've received confirmation. The fleet is ready. All ships are prepped, and the teams are in position." Rourke turned to him, her face a mask of cold determination. "Good. Make sure every ship is on standby. No room for mistakes." As Hale gave his salute and left to oversee the final preparations, Rourke looked to Dr. Malik, who stood at the console, his eyes scanning the data from the fleet. He had been invaluable, analyzing the artifact's power and guiding them through the maze of unknowns. But the artifact had become unpredictable, its capabilities still a mystery. "Malik," Rourke said, her voice low, "are we ready to use the artifact again?" Malik looked up, concern etched in his features. "We've refined the system, but there's still a risk. The artifact has power, immense power, but we don't fully understand it yet. If we trigger it at the wrong moment or too forcefully, we might end up destroying everything, including ourselves." Rourke met his gaze. "We don't have time for hesitation. If we're going to stop the Concorde, we need to gamble everything." Malik hesitated, then nodded, a glimmer of respect in his eyes. "Understood. We'll make it work." The strike began at dawn. The fleet emerged from hyperspace in the midst of the system, the fuel depot coming into view. The Concorde had underestimated them, thinking their small resistance would remain scattered, weak, and disorganized. But the fleet was now ready, and they were not only fighting for survival, but for the future of humanity. "Prepare to launch," Rourke ordered, standing tall on the bridge as the crew rushed into action. The fleet began its assault, sending bombers and fighters toward the fuel depot, while the main vessels hovered at a distance, ready to deploy their heavier weapons. "Targeting systems locked," Malik reported, his voice tense. "The artifact's energy field is active. We're ready to release it." "Do it," Rourke commanded. In the heart of the Defiant, the artifact's core began to hum, a deep resonating sound that echoed through the ship. A beam of brilliant alien energy shot from the Defiant's core, striking the fuel depot with a force that made the surrounding space shimmer and warp. The entire depot flickered like a mirage, then detonated in a chain reaction, sending a shockwave of fiery destruction across the system. The Concorde fleet was not prepared for the sheer devastation. Their ships scrambled to regroup, but the damage was catastrophic. Their supply lines were crippled, their reserves of fuel destroyed. A sense of panic spread as the remaining Concorde forces attempted to retaliate. But Rourke knew that this victory was not final. It was only the beginning. "Admiral, we've taken down the depot," Hale reported, his voice booming with excitement. "The Concorde's response is already faltering. We've bought ourselves time." Rourke's jaw tightened. "Good, but this is far from over. We need to keep pushing." The days that followed the strike were filled with frantic action. The Concorde responded with brutal force, sending reinforcements to the system. But the damage was done. The loss of the fuel depot, coupled with the disruption of their communications and supply chains, had left the enemy reeling. The resistance was no longer just a fractured group of survivors. It was a formidable force that had struck a serious blow to the heart of the Concorde's war machine. Rourke stood before her officers once more, the weight of their next steps settling heavily on her shoulders. They had proven that humanity could strike back, that they were capable of confronting the galaxy's most powerful empire head-on. But the Concorde was relentless, and there would be no easy victory. "This is just the start," she said, her voice filled with quiet resolve. "We've shown them what we're capable of. We've proven that humanity won't go quietly into the dark."